Hi, morning everyone. Welcome to episode 26 of the Knitting Expat Podcast. My name is Mina and I come to you from my home in Bahrain. Today is actually the 2nd of September, Wednesday the 2nd of September, the day that I'm recording this. And if you are a regular viewer of my podcast, you will know this is not my usual recording day. That is because tomorrow I am off for about 10 days to New York and London. So I wanted to pre-record an episode as I knew I wouldn't have any time this coming Monday to actually record the episode for you guys. So this is a special pre-recorded episode. I've got some of my usual content and some extra content in here for you guys. And so today's the 2nd of September, but you guys probably won't be seeing this until Monday the 7th. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Like I said, my name is Mina. You can find me on Ravelry as Mina86. The Ravelry group for the podcast is the Knitting Expat Podcast. You can find me on Instagram as Mina Phillip. I'm also on Periscope as Mina Phillip. And you can find show notes for the podcast on the knittingexpat.wordpress.com blog. And I sell project bags that I make as on my Etsy store, which is Mina Makes. So yeah, I have links for all of that below in the description box on YouTube, in the episode thread on Ravelry, and on the show notes. So wherever you are watching this video, you can find the links. So with that, I first wanted to start by saying thank you to Carleen of the Made with Carleenergy podcast, who gave me a little shout out on her recent episode. So thank you so much. And I've actually been really enjoying your podcast. I heard about it from Kristen of the Yarngasm podcast, or Woolen Vine Yarns. I always have trouble with that word. In my head I say it correctly, but out loud it always comes out like a jumbled mess. I don't know why. It's not that hard. But yes, so I heard about Carleen's podcast from Kristen. I went and checked her out, and she's got a really lovely podcast. Only just started. She's only got a couple of episodes up, so make sure you go and check her out. And also I wanted to correct a mistake I made in my episode last week. I talked about the Very Little Twitch and Stitch podcast. I accidentally called one of the hosts Martha. Her name's actually Marsha. I'm so sorry, Marsha. I wrote it down wrong in my notes and then just didn't realise as I was recording. I realised as soon as I uploaded the video and hit publish on YouTube, it suddenly hit me that I got the name wrong. So apologies for that, Marsha. And I also wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who purchased my pattern for the Love of Rainbows when it came out a couple of weeks ago. I forgot to mention in the episode last week. I forgot to say that. I had it in my notes but completely skipped over it and I forgot. But thank you so much to everyone who's purchased a copy of that pattern already. It really means a lot to me that you guys would do that. Right, so let's dive right in, moving on to finished objects. I have 2 finished objects for you guys this week, which actually isn't all that crazy, even though I only podcasted a couple of days ago. Because if you watched my last episode, you'll have seen that both these finished objects were close to being done. So first up are my whiz bang socks. I'll show them to you one at a time. So this pattern is Whiz Bang by Sarah Shu of the Inner Knit podcast, and I won this pattern as part of a knit along. See better, and I really like how that's sort of on like a stripy rainbow pattern down the front of the leg. And this is knit out of Knit Picks Stroll Fingering Country Fair hand painted. I don't know if that helps or not. Which is really soft. Knit Picks Stroll yarn is really soft, and I have 2 balls about this size left over, so enough for a square on my blanket and some mini skeins for swaps later. And this pair is for me, and I knit these on 2.5mm needles, and I did a fish lips kiss heel 1x1 rib, 20 rounds at the top. my standard sock recipe for me, if I'm knitting on 2.5mm needles, is 20 rows 1 by 1 rib, 80 rows for the leg, fish lips kiss heel, then 65 rows on the foot, and then a rounded toe. And that pretty much is my sock recipe for my foot. If I'm knitting on 2.25mm needles, then I just have to knit everything the same, except I do more rounds on the foot. I think I have to go up to about 70 rounds on the foot, and I knit 72 stitches. This is 64 stitches on 2.5s. On 2.25s I have to do 72, or I need to try it, but I think I might be able to get away with 68 stitches as well. I need to give that a try. And my second finished object is a second pair of socks. And this is a pair of socks. These will be a gift. And this is the charade pattern by Sarah. Is it Sarah or... One second, let me dig out the pattern so I can tell you exactly what that is, who it's by. I mean, it's by Sandra Park. Terrible, not prepared. Sandra Park. And it's a lovely little texture pattern on the leg. How well you can see that. There you go. And yeah, I really like how that came out. Again, rainbows. And there we go. Lovely rainbow socks. And that's been knit out of Lang Joel Magic Degrade. A lot of people, I was knitting these socks when I was in Dubai recently, and everyone who saw me knitting on these, their first reaction was like, oh, is that Zalbable? No, it's Lang Joel Magic Degrade. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I have quite a sizable amount left over, so those again, square in my blanket and some minis. So 2 finished pairs of socks. And so these are pairs number 16 and 17 for this year. That's adult socks. I've knit a few children's socks as well, but I'm only counting the adult socks. 17 pairs of adult socks so far this year. Woohoo! And this pair also has the fish lips kiss heel. This is these were knit on 2.25s with 64 stitches. Again, like I said, these are for a friend of mine. These would not fit my feet. These would be so tight. But and you can actually see they're quite sizably smaller than the other pair. Onto whips. I only have one whip at the moment, mainly because I was trying to clear my needles before going away. And so my next whip is in my Mina Makes project bag, my rainbow bag. A rainbow bag of awesomeness. And this is my shawl design, which is being knit out of Baronvuller. That's upside down. Baronvuller in her barefoot sock in the forest colourway and the best grey ever. This is the best grey ever, and this will be for the border. I love this colour, it's so beautifully tonal. And then this is the forest colourway, and you can see this is already starting to get small. I have about this much left from the first ball. Little nugget, as Kristen calls them, little yarn nuggets. And I'm well into the second ball. I have about a little over 1 repeat left to do on the shawl before I can start the border. So I'm really hoping that if I crack on with it, if I get everything else done and I have enough time to knit, I will be able to get this shawl to the border before we leave tomorrow, which is kind of my aim, because then I just have the border to do. And yeah, and I'll show you here, this is where I added the new yarn. And because they are hand dyed and they are tonal, I didn't want to alternate skeins all the way throughout, because that's a bit of a faff. But also because I wanted to know exactly how far I could get with one skein for the smaller size that I'm designing. So by the time I got to here was where I got to, which is where the smaller size would end, and there was still 10 grams left of the first skein, which wasn't going to be enough to get through another repeat. So I was like, okay, and I really figured out from my maths that was probably how far I would get to with one skein, so I'm glad my maths worked out. But what I did from there was for the next half chart, so for the next half repeat, I alternated skeins over those rows. I think it works out as being roughly 12 rows. I alternated skeins, and there is no visible line in the work because it is such a variegated tonal yarn. I mean, the tonality is quite variegated. I wasn't even worried even if I'd started with a new ball. I don't think you'd have gotten a massive line because it is so tonal, but I just wanted to avoid it potentially happening and just did it, alternated over those 12 rows, and then just carried on with the second ball without alternating the rest. And then the little yarn nugget I have left over is roughly about 4 and a bit grams, so that might be enough to get a square into my blanket, but I'm not going to start with that yet, just in case I need to go back to it if I happen to run out of yarn, which I don't think I will. But that's my project. You can get a little sneak peek into the pattern bit there. Yeah, I'm really enjoying that now. It's coming along great, and it shouldn't be long before it's ready. So like I mentioned in my last episode, I don't know if I will have already gotten in touch with you guys, with some people about testing yet or not. If I haven't, I probably will be, and if I have, then hopefully I'll have the pattern ready soon for you guys to start testing. And like I mentioned last time, I'm not showing you my Cozy Memories blanket because I just haven't done any work on it. Knit along news: the Sunrays cowl, which is for this shawl that I designed, is will be over today. So I think by the time this podcast goes up, or wait, no, what I'll do is I'll leave it open till the end of the 7th. So morning of the 8th, I'll close it, and then I will announce winners on the following episode, I think. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. The next episode I film will be, I'll probably be filming it in, I'll be filming it in New York, so I won't have the prizes with me, but I will announce the winners, and then, and I'll tell you which prize that you've won, and then you guys can get in touch with me after that. Then there's the Rainbow Knit Along, which is running until the end of September, so get all your rainbow knitting going for that. Enter those. There's like over 100 entries so far, so that's awesome. And the September cowl, the Sept cowl, has started, so make sure you jump in on that one too. Anything that is an S item: shawls, socks, scarves, sweaters. If it's a pattern that begins with an S but it's like mittens, then that's fine too. So anything with S, whips are allowed. Knitting or crochet is allowed. You need to be a member of the group to be eligible for prizes. All the usual rules and stuff, everything's explained. All the rules are laid out in the chatter and FO threads on the group, and there is an FO thread now. And I believe there's already been, but at the time that I'm recording, there's already been a couple of entries, so that's great. So make sure you jump on in and enjoy the fun. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for Knit Along news. I seem to be whizzing through this episode. I don't have as much to share, but yeah, okay. Now moving on to what will likely be the bulk of this episode, is the Q&A section. Just grab a little bag of stuff. I put out a call a couple of weeks ago for you guys to let me know if you had any questions for me to use for recording this episode, and because I didn't think I'd have that much content otherwise. So I have a few questions. The first 2 or 3 came from Instagram, and the rest came from people asking questions in the group. So the first question comes from Anya, who's Anya Loves Knits on Instagram and Ravelry now, and she's from Germany. And she actually asked, and I did reply to this on Instagram, and I told her, but I thought some of you guys may also be wondering this, is what do I do for a job? I talked about that briefly, I believe, in one of my earlier episodes. So if you're new to the podcast, you probably haven't You may have not seen it, but what I do for a job is I work in construction. That's what I studied at university, and that's what I've basically done as a job ever since. I studied to be a quantity surveyor at school at university in the UK. For those of you who don't know what that is, sometimes in the US or in Canada it's referred to as a cost manager, or a cost manager is probably the best way to describe it. We manage money. We manage the money for construction projects, and we can work either for the client or the contractor. So on either side of the coin, as it were. I've always worked for contractors. My husband studied the same thing at university, and that's how we met. He's always worked on the client side, so it's always been interesting that we've been on opposite sides of the table. We've never worked on the same project because that wouldn't be allowed. There were a couple of times where the possibility came up where I may have been assigned to a project where Perry was working on behalf of the client and I was working on behalf of the contractor, and at those sorts of occasions one of us would always have to say, that's my husband, or that's my wife, or at the time boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. So we wouldn't be allowed to work on the same project against each other, because for obvious reasons that would be a conflict. But yeah, basically that's what I do for a job. I manage money for construction projects, and I'm the company I work for at the moment. Their headquarters are based out of the US. They're in New Jersey, just across the river from Manhattan. So every time I go to New York, I tend to make a visit over to the office and say hello to everyone. And yeah, so I'm actually only working for this company, and they've only got one project at the moment in Dubai that I was working on. The project is finished, but there's still ongoing things that need attention. And so whilst it's not strictly within what was originally my job description, I am now the only person still working for the company based in the region. So they kind of just kept me on to handle all the little things that crop up. So that was why I went to Dubai a couple of weeks ago. That's kind of what I do for a job. I just manage all the random bits that come up. It's not a lot to do at the moment. It's just every now and again a couple of emails or just sending a few documents through and stuff, but it's okay, it's not bad. It's still a job technically, and it gives me plenty of time to knit, so I'm not complaining. Then Catherine, who's a girl with the rabbit in the US, she on Etsy as well. She's on Instagram as Girl with the Rabbit, on Ravelry as Girl with the Rabbit, and she has an Etsy shop where she sells project bags as Girl with the Rabbit. And she asked me if Christmas is celebrated in Bahrain. And the answer to that is yes. It is definitely celebrated in Bahrain and in Dubai and in the UAE in general. From my experiences, in Dubai especially, it's actually quite funny around Christmas time because the hotels seem to have a competition who can have the most lavish Christmas tree. So you get some really, really lavishly decorated Christmas trees going up around Christmas time in Dubai. And over here, I don't know how extensively the place gets decorated for Christmas. We've never been here for Christmas. It's our first year that we will be here. Don't know if you can hear that. It's one of the cats crying. I think it's Hugo. Don't know what he's complaining about. Anyway, there was one time, actually the first time I ever came to Bahrain, which was in 2008 with my mum. We were on our way to Iran, and we flew out. It was around November time, and we went for 3 weeks, and then we came back via Bahrain to go back home, and we had a 5-hour layover in the airport on the way back. And because it was towards the end of November by that time, we came out and we came into the transit hall, into the duty-free lounge, the departures area, what do you call it? And we walked into the hall, and the first thing we saw was this massive Christmas display, and both of us were completely shocked. Bear in mind, we just come from Iran, where everything is a little bit more strict, and back then it was a little bit more strict than it is now. There's no Christmas anything anywhere in Iran at that time of the year. and we suddenly walk in and you're completely bombarded by like all this Christmas decoration and Christmas music and stuff, and it was a real shock to our system because we were not expecting that at all. So yes, as an answer to your question, Christmas is celebrated in Bahrain to an extent, I imagine. I don't know exactly how extensively it is celebrated. As I said, there is a large proportion of the population are expats over here, so Christmas will definitely be a thing. Then Tanya, who's the Sampler Girl, who does the Sampler Girl podcast and is Busy Mama on Instagram, she asked me who looks after the boys when we travel, and the answer to that is we have a lovely pet sitter, and we had one in Dubai, and it was actually my biggest concern when we moved to Bahrain was whether we would find someone to look after the boys, because they don't do well with change. They don't like change, and Derek especially has had stress-related illnesses in the past. So I don't like to put him in stressful situations because I just don't want him to get ill, and I don't want to see him stressed because he can get very visibly stressed. You can a lot of the times it's hard to tell with cats if they're uncomfortable or unhappy. With Derek, it is very obvious, well, to me anyway, it is very obvious when there's something wrong with him or when he's not happy. So I don't like to put him in those sorts of situations. And so the last thing that I ever want to do with them is to board them, is to put them in boarding. They've never been put into boarding. We've always had someone come over to our house to look after them, just because it's what makes them most comfortable. So it keeps them in their own environment, and the only thing they have to deal with is a different person giving them their food and playing with them, and the fact that we're not around for a couple of weeks or however long we're away. And thankfully we were very lucky in that we found someone when we moved to Bahrain, and she's been great so far. She's always been happy to look after the boys when we've been traveling. So that's what we do with the boys when we travel. We have someone come around a couple times a day to play with them, feed them, clean up after them, and just give them some snuggles. Because they are very, as Scottish Folds, their breed in general is very much a companion cat. They like to be around people. They like company, and it's why we got two rather than just one, because at the time we were both working and neither of us liked the idea of just one of them being on their own. So whilst they do, for the most part, spend their days separate on their own in the house, it's nice for them to know that they have each other, and they do occasionally snuggle up together and clean each other and groom each other and stuff. So speaking of which, they're about to start a fight in the corridor. Anyway, right, so next question came from Nana, who's in Portugal. She asked, I would like to know a little bit about how you decided to start a podcast. What preparation did you make, planning episodes, show notes? What were the major difficulties you felt when you started to podcast? Do you use any particular app or tool to edit your recordings? She's got a couple of other questions, so I'll answer that first one. How did I decide to start a podcast? I decided to start a podcast, it was sort of in the run-up to the 1-year anniversary of when I actually started to knit, and I'd only recently started getting into podcasts. I really started watching podcasts around the end of December, beginning of January time, which coincidentally with when I had a broken leg. I was laying around in bed all day and had nothing else to do but to knit and to watch stuff online. And then after I got a little bit bored with everything else that I'd been watching, I turned to podcasts. Don't know how I ended up started watching them, but I did. And I kind of got sucked into them, into the black hole that is never-ending numbers of podcasts to watch. And then started thinking to myself, well, if everyone else is doing it, why can't I do it? And then around the same sort of time, we moved to Bahrain, and then I realized, I didn't really know anyone here, and I had a lot of spare time on my hands, so I thought, why not give it a go? There was no real forward planning with it, to be honest. It was very much a case of, let's record an episode and see what happens, sort of thing. yeah, it was very much okay, let's just give this a go. I did write out show notes. I've always written out show notes for every episode. I find more than anything else, it just helps keep my thoughts structured. Otherwise, I do, and I still do occasionally, just go off on random tangents and talk about whatever. But I don't, if I don't keep notes, then I'll always forget something. And even when I do keep notes, I tend to forget stuff anyway. The major difficulties I felt when I started a podcast was, would anyone actually want to listen to me? And I think I mentioned this in the first couple of episodes, is I'm relatively such a new knitter. I've only been knitting for, well, now a year and a half, but at the time, a year. I was like, will anyone actually want to listen to anything I have to say? I'm such a new knitter. There are so many knitters out there doing podcasts who are so much more experienced with knitting than I am. Why would anyone want to listen to me? That was my main concern with starting a podcast, was that just no one would want to listen. And another reason I started a podcast was I figured, after watching all these podcasts from all over the world, I realized there's no one podcasting from this region who knits. And I kind of felt like I wanted to put that out there, because there's always this preconception that people who live in this region, why would they want to knit? Well, why would they need to knit? There's nothing to knit for. You don't have the climate for knitting, as it were. And I know a lot of knitters who live in the Middle East, so I kind of felt like people ought to know that as well. So I think I hope that answers your question. What I use to record and edit my podcasts, I record using the forward-facing camera on my iPhone 6 Plus. It has done me well so far. The only thing it doesn't do is the autofocus. So I apologise for that, but at the moment I'm not in a position to be able to go out and buy a camera just for podcasting. And I edit using iMovie on my MacBook. So it's the program that my computer came with when I got it 4 or 5 years ago. And that's pretty much what I do. I do very minimal editing in my podcast. I don't do any fancy comment writing at the bottom of the screens, and so I have no idea how to do that. I just about know how to cut out little bits of the footage to make it a little bit less, if I make a mistake and stuff, to cut stuff out. But otherwise I don't do any other sort of fancy editing. I'm no Dan Jones from Bakery Bears, let's put it that way. And so your other questions was, do I have any type of yarn that I don't like to use and refuse to use? I started out knitting with acrylic yarn purely because that was what I could get, and I didn't really know that there was that much of a difference. I didn't really think that it made that much of a difference, just because I didn't know any better. But obviously, as I got to gain more experience and got to learn a bit more about what was out there and hear from other podcasts and stuff, you learn a lot. And you started to realize, and then I started knitting with nicer yarns, and then I started to notice a difference. And then I realized, okay, yeah, I'm not a fan of knitting with acrylic. I mean, I don't mind, I can knit with acrylic for specific things. Obviously, I understand, that it's a particularly useful thing to knit with for charity knitting, for baby knits, because you just want them to be easy care, and just stuff like that. There are reasons for it. But if I had the choice, I wouldn't knit with it. If I had to choose, I wouldn't knit with acrylic. I would rather knit with something that has a higher natural fiber content. But I don't think there's anything in particular that I can think of off the top of my head that I would say point blank, I refuse to knit with that. I will pretty much try to knit with anything, at least once. And your final couple of questions was, do I knit in public, and is knitting in public a regular, normal thing in Bahrain, or is it considered a weird thing to do? I very much definitely knit in public. I've always knit in public. I don't think I ever considered not knitting in public, or that it would be a weird thing. I think I just always did it, so it never occurred to me that it would be considered strange. I guess some people do consider it to be strange or odd. Funny story about that. I've not had any issues with it in Bahrain, I have to say. No one has ever said anything to me about me knitting in public in Bahrain. But when I was in Dubai recently, I had some time on my last day before I had to go to the airport so I just went to Dubai Mall for a bit. I didn't have anything I particularly needed to do, so after wandering around for a bit, I just found a sofa. They have these little clusters of sofas in the middle of the shopping centre, around, like, you know, in between where the shops are and stuff, for people to sit and rest, and if you're waiting for someone. So I was just sat in one of these sofas, and there's all like individual armchairs like dotted around in like a small circle. So I'm sat there knitting away on, as it what happened to be, my whiz bangs, and you know, just I had music on with my headphones, and I was just knitting away, and I had no idea, and I'm knitting, and the next thing I know, this head sort of just curls around the sofa, like this person just bends down with their body and like turns around, so their head's now in front facing me, but they're still standing to my side. Very odd. I'm just literally getting all up in my personal space, just staring at me knitting, not saying a word to me, not saying anything, just staring. And then she starts talking, and what I'm pretty sure it's Japanese. A very limited knowledge of the language, but I definitely recognised a couple of words. And then I sort of turned around, and there were like 3 other people standing behind me, like literally peering over my shoulders, watching me knit. And at that moment, I was just sat there going, how long have you people been there? Like, this is kind of creepy. And they spent the entire time that they were hovering after that, chatting to each other in Japanese over me, I'm presuming about me, because they were gesturing towards my knitting. And not a single one of them said anything to me at all throughout the entire time. And I was just like feeling rather uncomfortable in that situation. I mean, I'm sure that it was pretty harmless and they were just curious about what I was doing, but that was an interesting experience. But no, I don't think anyone's ever really said to me, why are you knitting? That's weird. But I do think it's not necessarily the most common thing for people to see other people knitting in public over here anyway. So people may look, but I've never had any sort of negative comments about it. Anissa from the USA, who also has the Luna Bear Loves Yarn podcast on YouTube, she asked me to talk about what my top 5 favourite yarns are. Now, I have a lot of lovely yarn in my stash. I have a lot of lovely hand-dyed, indie-dyed yarns that I love the feel of, but I have not yet knit. So I'm going to sort of preface this by saying that I'm only going to talk about yarns that my top 5 favourite yarns that I've actually knit with, because I don't think it's fair for me to claim something as a favourite yarn if I haven't knit with it, if that makes sense. I don't think that would really give you a fair review, as it were, of like. And the thing is, I am fairly new to knitting, so I think if you ask me this question again in about a year's time, you probably get very different answers, and I think that's what's really interesting about this sort of thing. So I think I probably will come back to this question in about a year and see what I would consider my top 5 favourite yarns then. So first up, would be Drops Baby Alpaca Silk. I think it's a really affordable yarn. It's really beautiful, it's lovely and soft, and as long as you're not allergic to alpaca, this is a very lovely fingering weight yarn to use. And I really like it, like I said, because it is so affordable for what it is. You can easily get a sweater quantity of this yarn for not very much money, making it quite affordable if you want to start out with garment knitting, but you're financially not able to fork out a lot for really fancy indie dyed yarn, but you still want to knit with luxury fibres. Baby Alpaca Silk. This is really lovely yarn, and like I said, very good affordable option. My next favourite yarn is kind of a it's kind of a 2-in-1 thing, because I think they're very similar. It's Knit Pick Stroll Fingering and the Cascade Heritage Sock. To me, I've knit with both of these, and they both feel very similar. They're both similarly plump, equally soft to knit with, and but I think Cascade yarn is more universally available for everyone. especially those in Europe and the UK where knit picks don't deliver to. So if you can't get hold of the knit picks, Cascade sock yarn is a very close comparison. It's a very good alternative. So those would be another favourite. Then of course there's Bare and Vulla. This is in no particular order, I'm just literally picking them up as I come across them. Is Bare and Vulla, her barefoot sock yarn. It's so soft, and my Pondalong socks out of this yarn, and I'm knitting my latest design project out of this yarn, and I really love it. It's lovely, it's plump, it's definitely a heavy fingering weight yarn, but that just makes it really squishy. It's 80% merino and 20% nylon. It's lovely. I totally forgot to say the Cascade Heritage sock is where is it? Does it not say? Oh, there we go. 75% merino, 25% nylon, and the knit picks is the same. 75% merino, 25% nylon. Next up, I have the Wool Barn yarn. The Wool Barn is dyed by the lovely Maya in the UK, and this is her twist sock base in Pebble Beach, in the Pebble Beach colourway. I think it's beautiful. Can't wait to make a really lovely pair of socks out of this. I knit my design socks. I designed my pair of socks that is currently being test knit out of her yarn. It's not the same base, but it's her yarn, and everything of Maya's that I've touched, I've loved. So I am sure I'm going to love this base as well. And the last one I wanted to show you was, Malabrigo sock. And I really like this yarn. It is not necessarily the softest when you're knitting with it, but it blocks beautifully, and it is so soft once it's blocked. I mean, it's perfectly fine, and it's perfectly enjoyable to knit with, and I really love it. It is, I believe it's 100% merino. I'm trying to find I believe it's 100% merino. Yeah, superwash merino wool. And this happens to be the Potion colourway, I think that's how you say it. And I really like it. I knit my first version of this shawl out of Malabrigo sock. I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I'd say those are my top 5 favourite yarns of the moment. At the moment, of yarns that I've knit with. Like I said, I have plenty of other yarns that I've not knit with yet, and I do like the traditional sort of the more commercial Reggias and like Lana Grossas and stuff for socks. Those are all great, and I've knit a lot with those, and I do enjoy them all a lot, but I've kind of left them out for this review or this selection of top 5. But like I said, I think I'm going to come back to that question maybe in a few months or a year's time to see how that changes, because I think it's interesting how your preferences and your what you consider your favourites change over time. And these are, again, like I said, only my favourites of what I've actually knit with. The next question came from Elaine, who's in the USA, and she asked, she says, I'm wondering how you store your finished items, especially shawls. I have a few shawls now, and I can't decide if I should fold them up and put them in a drawer, hang them up, display them, etc. Any suggestions? Well, what I would say to that is it just depends on your space and depends on where you store them, I guess. What I would really like to do is between where this bookcase is and the wall at the end here where my windows are, it's a really lovely big space of wall that I don't know what to do with at the moment, and I'm thinking about putting up some I guess not quite washing line, but that sort of thing, like rope, and attaching it to the wall so I can peg stuff to it and create like a little display wall. So that could be something you do. At the moment, what I do is I fold my shawls in half and then I roll them up and I store them in the cupboard that way, or in a storage box. At the moment, that's kind of what I do with them. Or if I want them on display at the moment, I just kind of hang them on the hanger, like you can see I've done with my For the Love of Rainbows shawl. But yeah, I definitely think that if you have a way of displaying them, then definitely have them on display, because then you get to see them and enjoy them, even if you're not wearing them. But if you have to store them in a cupboard, then folding them in half and rolling them up is generally a good way of doing it. Next question is from Ellen, who has recently started her own podcast as the Idle Cat Knits. She's based in the USA as well. She asked, what got me started in podcasting? Any tips for a newbie introvert interested in starting a channel? I kind of covered that a bit when I answered the previous question, but about starting a podcast, about how I started my podcast. But in terms of tips for a newbie / introvert, I would suggest keeping notes is always a good one. I keep my show notes in a notebook. I finished my last notebook, so I've started a new one. And I pretty much, it's not very detailed, but it's sort of just bullet point notes on what I want to talk about, like specific dates or project notes that I want to mention. My handwriting is atrocious. Yeah, and then even in between episodes, I write down notes on what I want to include. If like something happens that I don't want to forget to mention, I just kind of keep a running list, and then as I go to write up my show notes, I check the list to make sure I've covered everything I wanted to mention. Like I've said before, if I don't actually write stuff down, I won't remember to say it when I'm recording, because when I'm recording, I'm focusing on speaking and on trying to think of what's the next thing that I'm going to say. So if I don't have it written down, I tend to forget to talk about it. I'm kind of one of those people that if I did an episode without any show notes whatsoever, I probably could, but I'd end up at the end of it being like, afterwards being like, oh, I totally forgot to say that, and I totally forgot to say, and I probably would have left out half the things I wanted to talk about. So for that reason, I keep show notes. And that would probably be my biggest tip, is to keep show notes. Good lighting, if you can get good natural lighting, is really good. That's why I record first thing in the morning. It's not even 9 a.m. here yet. I also would recommend speaking up in a podcast. The worst thing about a podcast is when you're struggling to hear the person talk. And if you are a naturally quiet talker, you can either look to getting a microphone or trying to increase the sound in editing when you edit. That's actually what I do. Every time I edit, I do increase the sound on my podcast, just because I figure you can always turn down the volume on your computer, but you can only turn it up so far. So that's just what I find works for me. So those are my main tips: show notes, good lighting, speak up. I'd say that's about it, really. Pretty much covers it. Everything else is up to you and your content, really. Then Maria from the UK has asked, I'd love to hear more about living in the Middle East in general, and when you go to the fabric markets, do they have fabric with Arabic writing on it or Islamic patterns? I think they do have fabrics like that, but most of those fabrics tend to be dress fabrics, so they're not really suitable for making bags, which is why I've not purchased any so far. But I do always keep an eye out for fabrics that have prints that are, I guess, a little bit more like ethnic looking. I guess that even like the PC term for it anymore. A little bit more, have a little bit more of like a Middle Eastern sort of texture to them, or flair, or pattern. It's kind of like where the paisleys come from, the paisley prints that I got, and one of the linen bags that I recently had for sale, they're all sold out now, is it's got some nice little golden blue paisleys on it. I do always keep a lookout to see if I can find fabrics like that for bags, because I think that would be quite nice. But like I said, the ones that I have seen so far that I've liked have either been sort of like prints, like larger size prints, or they've been dress fabrics that wouldn't work for bags. And in terms of hearing more about living in the Middle East, I'm planning on trying to think up of topics that I could talk about and then spreading it over several episodes. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Kate in the UK has said that I'd be interested to know what made you choose the Middle East as your current home, and whether you think you'll stay there long term. And on a different note, I've spent much more time knitting recently than before, and I've noticed that my hands are starting to ache a bit. I know you knit a lot and wondered if you had the same problem, and if so, what do you do to avoid / reduce it? In response to your questions, Kate, first off, I actually responded to the second part of your question in the comments section, because I thought that's actually quite an important thing to talk about if you get aches in your wrists or your hands from knitting too much. And yes, I do occasionally, quite often, get aches and pains in my hands and wrists from knitting too much, just because I do knit a lot. Best thing I could say is to do some like hand stretches. I think this is a good one, and then sort of like stretching out your thumb. I'm not an expert, so don't take my word for it. You can either ask your doctor, or you can Google it, YouTube, for like hand exercises for knitters. I believe Minerva Turkey, in one of her episodes a while back, sort of talked about that as well. Taking regular breaks is always important. With knitting, you can kind of just get into the zone with it. I find that I keep correcting my posture when I knit. Like, when I find that I start out knitting fine, I'm sort of sat up straight, I'm knitting, and then as I knit more, I find I end up with hunched shoulders, and I'm sort of leaning over like this. So every sort of 5-10 minutes, I try and like remind myself, no, you need to sit up straight, you need to sit back, and don't hunch your shoulders, don't sort of like slouch. And I almost always knit in the chair. Like, I try not to sit on the sofa, because I tend to slouch a lot more when I'm sat on the sofa and knitting, and my posture definitely gets so much worse, and then I get backache. So I always try to be very conscious of how I'm sitting when I knit as well. And back to your first question about what made us choose the Middle East as our current home. Basically, when Perry and I were still dating, we talked a lot about what we wanted out of life, and obviously what we were looking for in our futures and things like that. I'd already lived abroad for a year. I'd lived in Vancouver whilst in between university for a year, and that was an amazing experience. I really loved it. It was my first real experience of living away from home, because even before, when I'd lived out of home, I was still in London, so it was still home. It was the first time I was somewhere completely new. I had 2 of my cousins, who are quite a bit older than me, lived in Vancouver as well, so I still had family around, which was great. And I have a lot of family in Seattle, so I used to go down to Seattle for weekends all the time, like pretty regularly and stuff. And it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed it. And so when we were talking, and Perry loves to travel as well, so working abroad was something we'd always discussed quite early on as something we wanted to do, or something we wanted to look at. We hadn't expected it to happen as soon as it did. The opportunity kind of came along a lot quicker than we'd anticipated. We hadn't really thought about sort of really looking into it for about it basically happened about 6 to 12 months sooner than we'd originally thought of. But the opportunity came across. There was a potential for Perry to get a job with a company. Originally in Qatar was where the first opportunity sort of came up. And then another friend of Perry's, who at the time he's still in Dubai, sort of got in touch with him saying, there might be a job for him at the company there. As it happened, it turns out the 2 jobs were with the same company, just in different branches. In different countries. One in Qatar, one in Dubai. So he ended up interviewing for both, and ended up going for the Dubai job. And we ended up accepting the job offer. He got the job offer for the job in Dubai as we were waiting for our Eurostar train to go to Paris. That was the trip where Perry proposed. So we got engaged and decided to move to Dubai on the same weekend. And a little less than, it was about 11 weeks later, we moved. And we're coming up to the end of September is our 4-year anniversary from when we moved to the Middle East. We literally left on the 30th of September and got to Dubai on the 1st of October, and that's how this crazy adventure all began. And we picked Dubai in the Middle East mostly because the language of business over here is English for the most part, and it's tax-free, so that was quite an attractive proposition in itself, not having to worry about paying taxes. And cost of living was it made it more affordable to live here because it was tax-free. Don't get me wrong, cost of living in the Middle East is not really all that cheap because everything is imported. There's very few things that actually originate from here, so everything has to be imported. So there are import taxes, which drives the price up, but on the flip side, you don't pay taxes on your salary, so it kind of balances things out relatively. We did look into potentially going to the US or Canada again, but what we do for a job, or what we did for jobs back then, it doesn't really exist in the same way over there yet. I mean, the idea of a cost manager or quantity surveying in construction is quite a new concept in the US. They just don't have that as a career. What I would have done as a job on behalf of a contractor would have been split over two or three other different job descriptions, as it were. Rather than having one person doing what I did, they kind of split up the responsibilities of what would be my role and assigned them to, and they would have been considered as part of someone else's job role, if that makes sense. So it's still quite a relatively new concept, so opportunities over there were limited. And we had considered Australia. There's a lot of opportunities in Australia for our general field of work, and any other sort of really economy where there's a lot of construction going on. But I, at the time, ruled out Australia because I was like, it's just way too far away. I mean, I would love to go to Australia to visit, but I didn't know at the time if I would really want to commit to living there. And so yeah, the Middle East became like the natural place to look, as it were, for jobs. And it worked out really well for us. We moved over, and within a month I'd found a job as well. And yeah, it's great. And also I have family in the region. My heritage, my background is I'm Iranian, for anyone who didn't know that. My parents are both from Iran. A lot of my family still live in Iran. So being here now is great because I'm only half an hour, 45 minutes away by plane to Iran, to where my family are. And having said that, a lot of my family live in the States as well. Like, everyone is all over the place nowadays, but Iran is where I'm from, is where, it's my roots, as it were, my cultural roots. I was born and raised in the UK, so I'm a British Iranian, as they say. First generation. My parents actually met in the UK. They didn't know each other beforehand. But that went off on a tangent, didn't it? Okay, I think I've answered that question for now. And you also asked whether you think we'll stay here long term. Well, we've been here almost 4 years now, and we'll probably be here for a while longer. We're not sure what the future holds for us in terms of where we'll go, but we've not ruled out anything. And I've always said to Perry, if anything comes along, any opportunities crop up, don't discount them just because you think I wouldn't be interested. Just, always ask about it, and always look into every opportunity that comes along. Don't close any doors. It's always worth considering anything at this point. We're still young, we're still quite, it's easy for us to move around. We're not too tied down to any particular place at the moment. So if these opportunities come up, we should look into them. We should seriously consider them. That's kind of our philosophy at the moment, is just take any opportunity that comes along. That's a good one, really. Next question, number 10, is from Sylvia, who's in the USA. And she's asked, what resources, if any, have you used to aid in the design process? I don't have many stitch dictionaries. I ordered a few that are now at my parents' house waiting for me. But I don't actually have any sort of stitch dictionaries as such here with me where I am now. So my main resources are online. A lot of how I started designing, and I mentioned this in an earlier episode, is I modified patterns. That's kind of how I got started, and I didn't even think about it at the time as designing. It only occurred to me afterwards, when I was actually designing, that I've really been doing this for a while, and there were times when I would start with a pattern and it just wasn't working out how I wanted it to, and it was looking weird, or it wasn't the right size, and so I'd go back and then I'd alter the pattern so drastically that it was almost a completely different pattern. I've never been scared of doing maths. Maths is basically my job. So knitting maths has never scared me. I've always been quite happy. And again, without even thinking about it, I realised afterwards, looking back on it, that I've always been altering patterns. I rarely knit a pattern exactly as it's written. I've always done something to change it. I've always made slight alterations. So then taking the leap from that to designing seemed like a very natural step. It didn't seem like such a strange thing or such a scary thing. And again, I had been designing my own things for a while without even realizing it, just making stuff up as I went along. I just hadn't written any of them up. So then thinking about doing it from a more sort of structured perspective, to actually design something with the intention of publishing it, is slightly different, because you've got to think about things a little bit more carefully and take more careful notes, so you've got more accurate measures on your yardage and gauge and all of this stuff. But in terms of, you also asked, where do I get inspiration for pattern designs? I get inspiration from all sorts of places, whether it's from circumstances or from like an experience from traveling, or from films, from music, from people I've met. Just literally from anywhere. Anything can be a design inspiration. Just like, a writer gets inspiration from all around them. I imagine designers have the same thing. I mean, I can't speak for everybody that designs or anything, but for me at the moment, it's just kind of like I look around and occasionally something comes to me, or I think of something and I'll just write it down on a scrap of paper or in a notebook or something, and then I'll have it there that I can go back and look at later when I actually have some time to try and formulate or try and elaborate on that. That shawl, the For the Love of Rainbows shawl, took me a ridiculous amount of time to think of for something that's relatively quite simple. I think I hit a real sort of block with that one, because I had the yarn in front of me. I knew I wanted it to be a 2-colour shawl, and I knew I wanted to have some sort of stripe and some sort of lace element to it, but I don't know, just nothing I thought of was really sticking in my mind as being like the right thing. So it took a lot of time before I actually settled on a design idea for that and getting started on it. And but I'm really, really happy with how it turned out in the end, and I couldn't be more ecstatic with how that one turned out. But as for the socks and hat that I've recently designed with the leaf motif on it, just to give you a rough idea, this is basically how I started that. I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. That is the extent of my drawing ability. That's rough. That's basically how my hat design started out. That's how my sock design started out. Literally just scribbles on a piece of paper. And I had originally just thought of doing a mitten pattern as well, like fingerless mitts pattern. But then as I was knitting the socks, I realised, as I did the charts, I drew up charts for all the different patterns. I did the chart for the mittens, and I looked at it and I was like, it's exactly the same as the socks. So the chart, is exactly the same as the socks. So if you get the sock pattern, you can quite easily take the chart, or take the written instructions even, for the lace section, and just use that with just a plain mitten pattern, and insert the lace onto the back of the mitten, and it's a pair of mittens. I really didn't think that there was much point, or even that it would be right to write up a mitten pattern with the same chart as I used for the socks, and then to charge people for it, because that would just be ridiculous. I kind of feel like if anyone buys the sock pattern, you can quite easily make that into a pair of mittens without much difficulty. So yeah, I didn't feel the need to actually write up a mitten pattern as well, because it would always be the same. So that's a bit about my design inspiration and how I sort of go about my process. I guess maybe I'll talk about that a bit more when I finish the shawl I'm currently working on, because there was a bit more of a process with that one. Then Emily from the UK has asked, I would love to know a bit more about needles. I'm on a tight budget, but may be able to ask for some for Christmas. So what needles are best and why? I particularly like wood. I feel safer in that I'm less likely to drop a stitch, particularly with socks. as so far I've been making them on DPNs. Alright, so with needles, I have a variety of needles. I have bamboo, I have wood, I have metal, I have aluminium, I have all sorts. But I'll talk about sets to begin with. I have 3 interchangeable sets of needles. The very first set of interchangeable needles that I got are my Knit Pro Symphonies. And I got these off of Amazon. And these are the very first proper needles that I bought without having ever tried them out. I ordered these 2 sort of sets, the chunky and the, what's this one called? Is it the starter set or something? From Amazon, and my mum brought them for me when we went to Iran last April, so a month after I started knitting I got hold of these, and I knit mostly with these for the longest time. Then I got other random sort of like fixed circulars and straights and whatevers, and then I got this set. I made the needle holder sort of thing myself, but this set of like metal needles, I cannot remember the brand name of them, but they were on sale and they're not the best. I don't like the cables very much, but they're actually pretty good for like flat knitting, or even for knitting in the round. I use these for my viajante without any trouble, but I'm not sure you can actually get these anymore. I got these on clearance sale. Then I also have a set of higher sharps, and these are the 4-inch needles, and these are really good. I really like these. They're lovely pointy tips. The yarn just like glides off of these, and they're beautiful. But if you want to stick with wooden needles, I definitely think the Knit Pro needles are really good. They have a few different sets. They have the Knit Pro Symphony, which are like the rainbow ones. And can you guess why I picked these needles as my first sets of needles? Purely because they were rainbow. That was my driving decision for why I bought these needles, was that they were rainbow. It was just lucky that I liked them. Yeah, not necessarily the best reason to buy needles, but anyway. They also have the sort of blue-green version, which is their Caspian needles, which is the same wood, just different colors. Then I think they have the rosewood and dreams, which are the color coordinate ones, which are all wooden needles, and I think any of them would be lovely, would be a lovely set to have. I've heard a lot about the carbons, the Knit Pro carbons, but again, I've never tried them, so I can't really review those for you properly. I can't recommend them without having tried them. But I've heard really good things. I've heard mixed things about those actually. A lot of people love them, and a lot of people have had issues with them, but I don't know whether that's actually because of the needles or because of the manufacturing. So if you want to stick with wooden needles, I definitely think Knit Pro or Knitter's Pride definitely do good needles, and I've never had any issues with mine. Then the next question I have is from Johanna, who's from Germany, and she asked, was it difficult to take the cats from the UK to Dubai to Bahrain as far as animal laws go? Are there lots of other Westerners where you live, and can you go about your day-to-day life in English, or can you speak Arabic as well? And is Bahrain the last stop for a while, or is there another destination on the horizon? So I'll actually answer your questions in reverse because it'll probably be quicker that way. Is Bahrain the last stop for a while, or is there another destination? For now, Bahrain is where we're going to be for at least another year and a half. We're going to be here until Perry finishes his MBA, because moving whilst he's studying is just not a good idea. And he's not likely to change jobs whilst he's still doing this MBA anyway, so we're definitely here until the end of next year when that finishes. And that also happens to be when the lease for our house runs out, is like in January of 2017 or something. So if we are going to move, whether we move within Bahrain or move somewhere else, that will probably be a good time to do it. So we're here at least for another year and a half, and then we'll see where we end up. Like I said before, we won't rule out any opportunities. We will always consider anything that comes along as a potential opportunity, and sort of figure out whether it's a good decision for us or not. Can we go about our day-to-day life in English, or can we speak Arabic as well? You definitely can go about your day-to-day life in English over here in the Middle East. For the most part, like I said, business language is English, so it's not really much of an issue. Occasionally, I do feel like if I knew Arabic, it might be a little bit easier, but I don't speak Arabic. I can read Arabic a little bit, but I don't necessarily know what I've read. I speak Farsi, which is the language spoken in Iran and some other countries as well, but mostly in Iran. And the alphabet, I can read Farsi as well. So the alphabet between Farsi and Arabic is very similar. They have most of the same letters, so I can read some Arabic. But like I said, it's like being able to read French but not understanding what you've read. It's that sort of thing. Are there lots of other Westerners where you live? Yes, like I've said, there are quite a lot of Westerners in Bahrain in general. I don't know that many, to be honest. I generally find it quite hard to meet people when we move somewhere new, because it's like, well, how do you meet? I generally don't understand how people meet other people over here. So yeah, it's interesting in that respect. Like you see them around all the time, but it's just like, what, do you randomly just go up to someone and say hello? It seems a bit strange. As for moving the cats, was it difficult to take the cats from the UK to Dubai to Bahrain? Well, we didn't get the cats until we moved to Dubai. We actually got the cats when we were in Dubai, about 6 months after we got there. We didn't have the boys in the UK. We had wanted to get cats, but everywhere we'd lived in the UK, we'd rented. And all the rental places that we were at were not pet friendly. So we never got cats when we were living in the UK, and we got the boys actually when we moved to Dubai. And it was after we talked about it. We talked about eventually getting cats and stuff, and I never really thought it was going to happen when it did. I don't even think Perry thought it would happen when it did. We talked about it, we started talking about it towards like the end of January in 2012, about maybe starting to look to get cats. And by that point, we were pretty much set that we wanted Scottish Folds. We knew from the beginning that we wanted Scottish Fold cats. We'd both been obsessed with them for years, but they are quite difficult to get hold of. I don't know how much you know about the breed of Scottish Folds, but they're not a purebred breed by any stretch. The Scottish Fold trait of the folded ears is actually a genetic deformation, as it were. So the way they are bred is you have one cat with folded ears bred with a regular cat without folded ears, so a British short hair or an American short hair or any sort of regular non-folded ear cat, doesn't matter what the breed, any non-folded ear cat. And then obviously the litter then have a 50-50 chance of having folded ears or not folded ears, and it comes up within the first few weeks, whether their ears are going to be folded or not. And non-folded ear Scottish Fold cats have all the same sort of behavioural traits as folded ear Scottish Fold cats, but in that they're quite really mellow, relaxed cats. But the folded ears are the really the ones that are really wanted, if that makes sense. They're quite rare because it's quite hard to breed, but at the same time you need to be careful, because there was a while, because it is a genetic deformity technically, you don't want to breed a folded ear cat with another folded ear cat, because that is when you end up with cats with really bad health problems. And as a result of that, the Scottish Fold in different countries are either not defined as a separate breed or are, because of that problem. They don't want a folded cat bred with another folded cat, because it's not right for the animals. It's not fair on the animals, because it creates other problems that they shouldn't have. But if one cat's folded and the other one isn't folded, and the kittens are half and half, then they are less likely to have any health issues, and our boys are perfectly fine. They have never had any problems to do with that at all. They've both been healthy for the most part. Like I said, Derek has had stress-related illness, but otherwise he's been very healthy. They've both been very healthy, and it's something we've always kept an eye out for. But for that reason, gone off on a tangent, but for that reason, Scottish Fold cats are generally quite a rare breed, or quite hard to get hold of. They don't come up very often for adoption either, because usually you go through quite a bit of trouble to get hold of them in the first place. But we got lucky. We found we found a company, I guess, they're a cattery. They sort of have cats and dogs and stuff in Dubai, who was they were bringing them in from Europe, from their breeder in Europe, and we got all the paperwork for them and everything, and we'd called around a few other places who bring in Scottish Fold kittens, and they all the kittens that they were getting in were already spoken for, and so we found this pen. They had 2 coming in that they weren't spoken for, and so we basically said we'll take them. We had no idea if they were boys, if they were girls, if they had folded ears or not, what colour we had no idea about any of that information. We just knew there were 2 cats coming in that were Scottish Folds, 2 kittens that were coming in. And as it turned out, this place was around the corner from where I was working. So when Perry called me to tell me that he'd found them, they were coming in, we went to see them the day they arrived, as it were, and I got there about 10 minutes before Perry, because I pretty much ran there from the office while Perry was driving from where he was working. And by the time he walked into the room where I had both the boys on my lap. They were so tiny. They were literally you could fit in the palm of my hands. They were so small. I'll put a picture up here for you guys. Yeah, and they were so small. They were so tiny and so cute. And I just looked at Perry, and there was no way we weren't going to get both of them. I could not even bear the idea of splitting them up. And that's sort of how we got them, really. That's how we found them, and that was Valentine's Day in 2012. So, and we brought them home a couple of weeks later. They had to stay in quarantine to make sure they didn't have any illnesses. Derek actually had kitty flu, which is actually quite dangerous for them when they're that young, but he got over it. He was fine, but he had to stay at the vet for a week longer than Hugo before we could bring him home. But once we got them both home, they settled in okay after a while. It took Derek a couple of weeks to settle in and to trust us properly, but he's been perfectly fine ever since. And moving them from Dubai to Bahrain, I have never been more stressed in my entire life. That for me must have been, I think it was more stressful for me than it was for them. It was the first time that they were away, I guess, because they had to go there's a company in Dubai that does pet relocation, and we could have done the process ourselves, or we could have partially done it ourselves, and it would have worked out slightly cheaper that way. But frankly, I didn't want to there's so much bureaucratic red tape associated with moving animals in the Middle East, or anywhere, I guess, that I didn't want to run the risk of something going wrong and me getting something wrong or whatever, because I would have been the one having to deal with it. And I was like, you know what, I would rather pay someone else to deal with that stress. I'm going to be stressed enough to deal with the movers and other things associated with our move. I just need peace of mind when it comes to the boys. So we were happy to pay that little bit extra for that peace of mind. And they were great. They were in touch with us all the time. They kept giving me updates after I dropped the boys off, which in itself was quite heart-wrenching for me. And yeah, everything was fine. They handled the move fine, and they got here. I think actually what was more stressful for them than actually being relocated was when the movers came to take all the furniture, because I kept myself locked in one of our bedrooms with the boys. The movers came and packed up. The movers that we got came and packed everything for us. Because we were relocating to another country, they had to physically pack everything to ensure it was packed correctly in order for the insurance to be valid for the move. So that was great. I mean, I didn't have to lift a finger. So whilst they came over 2 days and packed our entire apartment up in 2 days and moved it out, And so for one day we were all in one bedroom, me and the boys, and then for the second day we went into the second bedroom. And that day was more stressful for them because we were in a bedroom that was empty with no furniture in it other than a couple of suitcases and a couple of air beds. And they just, Derek especially, just did not like what was going on. He spent the entire day in a box with the lid down, literally just cowered into this box, and Hugo spent the whole day in the back corner of one of the wardrobes, huddled up. They just did not like it at all. They didn't like it. And then after the movers left and they were let out into an empty apartment, they were not happy. Derek especially. That is the day Derek found his voice. Derek has always been a quiet cat up until the day the movers took the furniture, and then he would walk around the empty apartment just crying, meowing so loudly, and we couldn't sleep at night because he was meowing so much and so loud, like he was properly wailing. And it broke my heart to hear him crying like that, because it was so sad, because you could just tell that he was not happy. So we lived like that for about a week, until our move day came up, and we moved the boys. I took the boys to the people who were relocating them, and they had them overnight because they had to weigh them and get everything like sorted, and they were being moved first thing the next morning, and I flew the same day as them. And I got to Bahrain, as soon as I got to Bahrain, about half an hour after I got here, I got a phone call from the guy at this end who was picking the boys up from the airport to let me know that they'd landed and that they'd been processed and they'd been coming through, and that they would be with me within a few hours or something once they got released from the airport. And yeah, I got home with enough I got here with enough time to sort of just settle in, run to the shops, get some food, come back, get a litter box set up for the boys and get their water and food and everything set up, and then they showed up. And yeah, it didn't take them too long to get settled in. But ever since, Derek has found his voice, and he is just meowing like crazy, and he doesn't shut up anymore. So yeah, that's how we moved them over. It was definitely more stressful for me than it was for them, I think. The actual experience of the movers coming and taking the furniture was stressful for them, but the actual move here, I don't think was all that stressful. It was only a 1 hour flight, but I think for me it was quite nerve-wracking. But yeah, they were so happy when we unpacked their cat tree, the big cat tree in our living room that you've probably seen in some pictures and stuff. They were so happy when that was finally unpacked. Literally, they could not wait for Perry to reassemble it. They were climbing onto it as he was trying to assemble it, and they didn't leave it. They both slept on it all night. They were so happy. And the last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the questions was, someone asked me, I mentioned in the last episode that I had an elephant story, and a couple of you guys got back in touch and said, well, okay, now that you mentioned it, you have to tell us this elephant story. And the elephant story was from when we went to Thailand in 2012 for about 10 days. We actually got married in Thailand. We eloped. We never actually had a wedding. We had planned on having a wedding. We got engaged before we moved to Dubai, and we had planned on having a wedding, but it just it got incredibly stressful, and I'm not going to go into the details. I wrote a whole blog post about it, so I will link that in the show notes for anyone who's interested. But we'd already planned this trip to Thailand, and I just said to Perry, well, this is just getting too much, why don't we just get married while we're there? And so we did. We got married in Thailand and we eloped, and then we'd already I'd already got my dress, and that was pretty much the only thing we'd already sorted. We'd sort of like reserved a location, but we cancelled that, and that was fine. Venue, I mean. But I already had my dress, and we were planning on going back in the summer anyway. And so we just had a party in my parents' garden, and I got to wear my dress. I figured I've paid for it already, I may as well wear it once. And so we just had a party in my parents' back garden to celebrate the fact that we'd got married, but we didn't actually have a wedding. So yeah, that was that. So whilst we were in Thailand, we went up to Chiang Mai, which was one of my favourite parts of the trip, and we went to visit an elephant sanctuary. And this place is a really lovely place. They look after elephants, and they really do take care of them. We got to learn about them and what they do there, and as part of the as part of the visit, we got to like learn how to ride the elephants properly. And this isn't like riding the elephants in, you know, they don't stick a basket on the back of the elephant. You literally learn how to grab onto the elephant, like you sit right on the elephant. And so I got this picture that Perry took. I don't know how well you can see that. That's me sat on the back of the elephant. And this is one of the pictures that we had framed up on our wall before. I have so many pictures from that trip. And then after we rode the elephants, we got to, so you learn how to get onto them and get off them and how to ride them properly. And, you know, we really learned a lot about it. And there was like a group of us who were there. And then afterwards, for those of us who wanted to, which I obviously did, we got to help give the elephants a bath afterwards in the sort of like lake pond thing. So you literally got to ride it on the back of the elephant into the water while the elephants just sort of like splashed around and stuff, and we got to help wash them and brush them. Perry decided he didn't want to get in the water, so he stood on the sides taking pictures. So there's pictures of that as well, and I'll link that blog post in the show notes too for anyone who's interested in seeing more pictures. But I've always loved elephants. I've always thought they were like gentle giants. And so that was really special for us to be able to do that. And I think Perry really enjoyed it as well. And that's that question answered. I think that's all the questions. Moving up to wrap up the final bits here. Shop update. The shop is now closed whilst I am away. I will open up the shop again a couple of days before I come back. And I have to say, I saw some on Instagram the other day, someone posted that a bag that they'd bought from me had arrived, and I was so shocked because it had gotten to them in the Netherlands in less than 4 days. I was so surprised. I was absolutely gobsmacked. I think what had happened was, and I got to the post office earlier than I normally do that day that I mailed those bags, and the guy at the post office said, "You came at a really good time, because the post leaves, like they pick up the mail from that post office at about 3 p.m. and I normally end up going to the post office after 3 p.m. when I do go, but that day I got there around 2. And so as I was literally stamping each package and passing it along to the guy, he was sticking the sticker on it and sticking it straight into the post bag, and they must have been picked up and mailed out and like taken out to the sorting office to then be sent off the same day. So I think I kind of got a 1 day jump start on that, but even so, less than 4 days is incredibly fast. So I hope the rest of you who ordered bags on the last update get them, or will have gotten them, or will get them very soon. Really quickly for acquisitions, I don't have that much to share with you. Nothing new has come since I last podcasted. I did sign up for the FiberShare swap for this next round. So if you guys haven't signed up already, you can. I believe the sign-ups are open until the 15th of September. So yeah, join in. I think it'll be really fun. I'm really looking forward to that. And the other thing I wanted to show you guys was I picked up some fabrics when I was in Dubai. And I shared a sneak peek of these on Instagram, but I haven't actually shown them to you on the podcast. So I thought I would do that quickly now. Oh jeez, I probably should have gotten these out of the bag sooner. Sorry about the rustling. So first up is what I originally was going to call cat burglar fabric, but as it's been pointed out to me, they are probably raccoons. So you guys tell me, are these raccoons or are these cat burglars? Because I think they look really cute. How adorable are these? Raccoons or cats, I think they're really, really cute. And then I got this green polka dot fabric to go for the lining of that one. I picked up some of this really cute sort of like gardening, picnicky type fabric. I just thought it was really cute. I really like the little people. They're so adorable, little wheelbarrows. And I'm going to use some of this green polka dot fabric for the lining of that one. Then I quite like this fabric. It was almost like a little abstract pond, water lily type of print. At least that's what it looks like to me. I'm not even entirely sure which way is up with this one. I'm not even sure if that matters. I really like the print on this one. And then I've got this fabric to go for the lining, this sort of orangey textured cotton. And these are all 100% cotton. This is actually one that I got in Bahrain a while back, but I never actually showed it to you guys on the podcast. It's this vintage rose print, which I really love. I think that's really beautiful. I really like that. And I love the colour of this. Sort of like a really sort of dusky pink, which I quite like. I know I don't really like pink, but I really like it in this print. Then I got this as one of my more Christmassy prints that I picked up. And I like it because it's not just a Christmas print, it's very much like a winter print. A little sled, and a little sled here. I really like this one. And then I got enough of this green polka dot fabric to use as lining for this one as well, which I think matches quite nicely. And then got some other Christmas prints. There's this fun Santa, Christmas trees, snowmen and gingerbread men and reindeer print, which I think is quite fun. Then there's this Santa one. Santa coming out of a Christmas tree. Christmas tree? Chimney. Jeez. Getting stuff wrong. And then I got some of this, which goes quite nicely with that one, I think. I'll use this as a lining for some of those bags, I'm not sure which ones. And then finally, one of my favourite ones, Christmas penguins. How cute are they? Little skating penguins. So those will be bags coming some point soon, hopefully. Once I get back from the trip, I'll be able to get cracking with some bags. And last things I wanted to say, week in review. Not much has happened. I have only podcasted a couple of days ago, but it was Perry's birthday on Monday, and he wanted me to tell you guys thank you so much for all of you who have given him, sent him well wishes and happy birthdays on Instagram. He really appreciates it all. And he came home from work that day holding a balloon and a couple of like bags of stuff, and I was like, what is going on? It's like, I accidentally let it slip at a meeting in the morning that it was my birthday that day. He let it slip. I don't know, it was like 10 a.m. in the morning or something, 10 or 11, that he let it slip by accident that it was his birthday. And by 2 p.m. they had organised a surprise party in the office with a cake and presents and balloons and all sorts, and I completely embarrassed him with all of that and sent him home with presents and stuff. And so that was quite funny. And then I gave him the presents that I'd made him, and he loved them all, thankfully. Unfortunately, somehow he managed to see all of them at some point or another whilst they were being made, which kind of confuses me, because I know I did the hat and the cowl while he was away and he never saw them. But anyway, he likes them, so I guess that's what matters. Otherwise, I have got to get on with packing because I have not packed a thing yet. What I did do yesterday was what I did when we got back from London was I photographed all the yarn that I'd got at the time in my stash, and I had pictures of that on my computer. And what I did yesterday was, just with my phone, I just took out all the new yarn since then and put photos of that with my phone. And then I emailed myself the pictures that I'd already taken of my stash, and I've created a folder on my phone. I can't show you because I'm filming on my phone, but I created a folder in my photos section on my phone where I now have pictures of all of my yarn that's in my stash, which means when I'm traveling and I'm looking to purchase yarn, I can check to see what I already have, if I have something to match it, or just to make sure I'm not buying something in a similar colour scheme already that I already have. So a little tip for you: maybe keep pictures of your yarn stash on your phone. I guess if you use the Ravelry stash feature, then that's not such an issue, but I don't, so this works for me. Yeah, so I think that about covers it for this week. This has been way more chatty than I'd expected, but I guess that's what this episode was always going to be, a chatty one. Thank you so much for tuning in, if you have. I forgot to mention at the beginning, welcome to all new and returning viewers, but welcome, thank you for joining me. Or rather, thank you for sticking with me for an hour and a half. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I don't have any questions for you guys this week, so enjoy a question-free week. Please do let me know if you have any comments, or if there's anything I've talked about that you have anything that you want to add to. Yeah, I'd be really interested in hearing from you. So thank you again for tuning in, and I hope you have a lovely week, and I'll see you soon. Bye.